Hello, everyone. This is the Sleepover podcast with Carolyn Elliott and Laila Bernard.
Hey, and we're having a potluck at my house tonight, and my old friends Alex Baker and Kevin May are here. Alex is a great astrologer with Reverie Astrology, right?
Indeed.
And Kevin May has done so much. He got the whole consciousness and spirituality scene started in Pittsburgh, as far as I can tell. And he is also a poet and a YouTube personality.
Author
and
of
an
several
author
books.
of multiple books. Anyways, everybody, hey. So we were just talking, and the conversation was getting interesting. Laila and Kevin were talking about the quantum nature of consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, I've been nerding out on a bunch of YouTube videos lately and reading a really wonderful book about, it's called Fear of a Dark Universe, which deals with like dark energy and dark matter. And the author of it suggests that like the universe is expanding, acceleratingly away from itself because more and more consciousness keeps coming into being. And like when, these views no longer reflect the author, but his theory is that the universe is expanding because of expanding consciousness. And from here on out, it's Laila being like, whoa, yes, that's definitely what's happening. As we each like expand our own perceptual horizon, we do like make more universe, make more reality. So it makes sense that mathematically that's also what's happening. That's the reason why the galaxies are flipping away from each other. That's what.
Whoa.
Yeah. Here we are, making space and reality. And Kevin has a really dope shirt on that he was using to describe the whole toroidal nature of the thing.
Yeah, well, happy Tuesday, beautiful humans of the multiverse. It's nice to meet you. And yeah, we were just nerding out in the kitchen, and I was saying how whatever you want to call it, God, source, whatever, if you just imagine that at some point it was only one singular point and there was no reference point whatsoever, you probably couldn't even call it a point because there was no such thing as there was no such thing as language to even exist.
I feel like I want to step in because that's like part of what the guy who's what I'm understanding from this Fear of the Dark Universe book, who's giving me a view of quantum physics understanding of the Big Bang, is that we talk about there being like quote unquote nothingness before the Big Bang, but in a quantum view, from what I understand, it was a like super high potential energy vacuum wherein things were coming into being in like every trillionth of a second all the time and then immediately being subsumed. And it wasn't until some awareness was like present that anything crystallized into real matter, and that as soon as that happened, the entire universe started exploding into being. And in fact, one of the videos that I watched was talking about how the background radiation of the universe is basically a picture of the like original eruption of beingness out of the quantum vacuum. Like the background radiation is a picture of the infancy of the universe. And like, anyway, before that, it wasn't nothing. It was just this like multi-potentiated vacuum.
All right, fair enough. I guess you were probably there to confirm that.
We all were, weren't we, Kevin?
Yeah. Well, this shirt that I have on is the flower of life, which if you're not familiar with it, just Google the flower of life. It's a geometric pattern, and it's composed of a bunch of smaller patterns, which is called the seed of life. So at the very center, you have a singular dot, which could be like the full unified point, which the supposed Big Bang, which is just like a story, came from. But then in order to create any sort of point of reference, you would have to create another point, which would then, to connect those points, you would create a line. So that created like the first dimension, was just a straight line. And then from there, if you did another thing, you would do a circle between those 2 points. So then that circle creates like the next...
A field, like a plane.
Exactly,
a plane, yeah.
In fact, actually, I fucked it up. The circle came before the line because the circle is just. I mean, we're all fucking theorizing here anyway.
We're all just hanging out on the porch.
So this is like a little bit like drunk quantum physics, right? Like drunk history.
You know, it's like what happens when
Drunk
you're
symbol
people
system.
who like to hang out and talk about consciousness and what we're all doing here.
When we hang out at a party. That's what this is, folks. So
This is
enjoy. All right,
yeah.
continue, Kevin.
Okay, so
You wish you were on the porch.
So in
Drunk
order to
polarity
create
playground.
any point of reference from that point, you draw a perimeter, which is then a circle, and then from there you add another circle, which creates what's called the Vesica Pisces, which looks like kind of like an eye.
Dude, I've contemplated the Vesica Pisces many times, and it's like the intersection of two circles meeting
Exactly.
each other and like
creating a relationship.
totally. And it's and like whenever you meet another point of consciousness, like another human being, like that's literally what's happening. Is like you and that consciousness are like, okay, there's some things that are just me, and there's some things that are just you, and yet
like
in
a
this
Venn
moment,
diagram.
we are sharing this experience of each other. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it also could be seen in the cells dividing. Like when a cell multiplies, it first has a 2, which creates a Venn diagram. Then it creates eventually a seed of life, which is 6 circles. So to me, that's like a fundamental structure of reality. And what I think is crazy is just some people say like, it in the highest dimension is just pure light, and then other people are like, no, it's actually all from the dark womb of the mother. But it's, to me, it's like neither one could even actually exist without any reference to the other one, or there would be no way to distinguish. So it's like, I think it's actually the yin yang, which, you know,
Is a giant Taurus.
exactly a
Swirling
three-dimensional
vortex.
Yeah, the yin yang, if you look at it three-dimensionally, it creates a tube torus, which is also the flower of life. So yeah,
It's all just sucking in on each other. Yeah. Oh, man. I love thinking about the fact that if you travel at the speed of light, there is no such thing as distance. Like, light travels so quickly that, like, whatever light hits, like, if you were light, you would be at your origin point and your destination at the same time. Like, there's no separation whatsoever.
Wait, isn't there? I thought there was a separation. I thought the speed of light was like a thing that they measured or something.
Well, but when you travel at the speed of light, like, you collapse time and space such that you are at this, like, you're at the point that the light originated from and the point that the light hit in the same moment. There isn't a difference.
Wait, I'm confused
Under
though, because
our
don't they say
magnifying
that like
glass.
Right.
don't they say that we see like stars that like started sending their light out millions of years ago, like stars that aren't even there anymore?
Yes, because we're not traveling at the speed of light, but like
Okay.
the light that's
But
traveling
the
from
light
those
took
stars.
millions of years.
If you were a light beam,
Yeah.
you would be both shining on Carolyn and on that star at
Oh.
the same time.
Oh.
There is no real separation for the beam that thing is. Anyway, we're all here together is what I'm really trying to say. Like, we're really hanging out in the multiverse with one another in a deep, intimate, freaky way.
Well, as someone with 7 Saturn-ruled planets in his chart, I'm more here to contribute to the dark matter.
Oh, dark matter for sure is.
So what is dark matter, guys?
So what I've understood from this book that I'm reading, and maybe there are people who are more knowledgeable than me listening to this podcast who will laugh at me and scoff. Feel free to write in to me and engage and educate me. But my understanding is that dark energy is like the vacuum energy of space that is pushing all of space away from each other. Like, you've heard the idea that like the universe is expanding.
Yeah.
So space is getting larger. There isn't like, and time, because space and time are one
Okay, here's
thing.
the thing. Okay, wait, can I ask a question though?
Let's try.
I'm just always curious, how do they know that it's expanding? Like, have they measured the full circumference?
Well,
how
it's
do you
like-
know
okay.
that's
I
expanding?
can see it.
No, so it's okay. So high school physics teacher Layla will try to explain this question. You know, so like it's like a Doppler effect thing.
Okay.
So when you like, for example, when you hear a train coming towards you, like the sound is like higher pitched as it's coming towards you, and then it becomes lower pitched as you go away. They can tell by the stretching and distortion in the waves from distant objects that they are moving away from us versus coming towards us, because waves that are moving towards us, like objects that are moving towards us, have waves that are compressing, and objects that are moving away from us have waves that are stretching. So they can measure the rate of how fast something is moving away by how much the information that it's sending is distorted.
Thank you, high school physics teacher Layla, because I truly never understood that when they said that the universe was expanding. I was like, really? Did you go around with a tape measure? but
No,
that makes
it's
sense. What you're
it's
saying about the waves. It makes sense.
It's some like Doppler effect kind of stuff, you know. It's some train whistle stuff. You can think about that.
It's like the roadrunner going off the edge of the cliff. That's
Okay, so the universe is expanding. So then the dark matter.
The dark matter is the vacuum. It's like the opposite of gravity. Like gravity is that force that like says to matter, like stick together and be together and like be as one. And the dark energy is the opposing force that is forcing the galaxy. Like the galaxies, which are concentrated matter, are like sucking together. And, you know, there's many theories that say that they all have black holes at the center, which are like super dense matter. So galaxies are like regions of the universe that are gravity intense. And the space between galaxies are the parts of the universe where dark energy
pushing everything apart.
It's the opposite. It's the opposite. Yeah.
Dark matter's
Sexy.
I know, right? It's like the repellent. It's the opposite side of the magnet.
It's the universe's, Saturnine latex kink. It's like, let's create layers of separation here.
Wait, I'm confused though. Okay, because they call it a black hole, and that's very dense and very intense gravitational pull. And then they also call stuff dark matter, but that's not a gravitational pull. It's the opposite.
It's the
that's
opposite.
pushing it away.
It's a black hole.
Okay.
Because light can't escape from it because things are so dense. We're like really
so
nerdy.
they just call
people.
stuff black and dark whenever they want.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because this book that I'm reading is called Fear of a Dark Universe, which is kind of talking about how in physics there's this like bias towards calling things that the physics doesn't understand black and dark and mysterious, and like giving it this like, you know, evil cast because we don't know what it is. We don't know where stuff goes. We don't know how that part of the universe is operating. Like black holes are mysterious as fuck. So is the vacuum of space that seems to be crazily expanding and making more of itself somehow. From every point, everywhere. Like space is just getting more spacious. That's weird, confusing. Neither of those things feel good to either of us. Black, dark energy.
That which is yet to be made known.
Correct. The
Jungian,
feminine.
the Jungian,
right, exactly.
That which is yet to be individuated kind of thing.
Exactly. The unknown.
Yeah, the unmanifest and the unknown. Yeah, well, so what? Okay. So there's speculations, right, about the properties of this dark matter and like what's going on with it, right? Like, and people are trying to figure that out.
It's a major question in physics. People are really, I don't pretend to know. I'm just a dork on a porch right now. But
how the
people
fuck
are very
we ever
curious
going to
about it.
confirm it until we go
That's just
capture
junk
some
DNA.
The thing that's
oh yeah, that junk.
Oh, no, that's shit we didn't figure out yet.
the thing that's so interesting to me about it is like, you know, so far as I can tell, like you can sum up the like quantum like theory or premise of the universe with the like ancient koan of like if a tree falls in the woods and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? Like something about our universe exists because it's known, and if it weren't known, then it wouldn't exist. Like the witnessing of reality is essential to reality. And before, there was a time like this, that's what this whole Big Bang, like creation of the whole thing is about, is that like there was a time when there wasn't a knower. And it was just potential, everything, nothing, and like it's the place.
Would that be like kabbalistically speaking? Would that be like the Ein Sof?
Right. Correct.
Like,
exactly. That would be like the great beyond, the non-knowing, the like ether, the nothingness beyond the nothingness, and then suddenly like a knowing happened and it all like burst into being, and without that there is no knowing. And it's interesting because like physicists are like very interesting. There would need to be some kind of time reference and some kind of knowing and reference point in order for the whole thing to exist. Anyway, we'll have to do the math about that. Yeah. But like they miss the whole point that like whoa, like
Yeah.
there's a consciousness must be.
What the scientists don't know is that first Big Bang was when an alien in the 13th dimension first smoked DMT and created a whole universe inside of his brain.
Correct.
And that's where we live.
And that's where we live.
And every
oh my
time
God,
you
so
smoke,
comforting.
every time a hippie smokes some DMT, a whole other universe comes into being, and angels get their wings.
By the way, I'm reading this great book on anti-gravity, and I just can't seem to put it down.
Amazing.
It's really something.
My dad's really into the anti-gravity stuff. We should talk about that some other time, Kevin.
Is your dad also really into the anti-gravity dad jokes?
Oh no. He's into other dad jokes, but
okay. Well, so this is what I'm wondering. So you were saying that perhaps the universe is expanding. Because
definitely the universe is expanding.
Okay, definitely the universe is expanding.
But perhaps because
consciousness is expanding.
Yeah.
So do you mean that in the sense of like, just like we're just saying that like.
Well, it's because like as like you and like.
Do you think it correlates to human consciousness expanding?
Well, human consciousness and like alien consciousnesses, and one of the things that he was talking about in this book that I'm not going to pretend to fully understand is quantum computing, which uses like indeterminate states to do calculations, which is like hyper manipulation of this knowingness field and like what can be known and what might be known. And he's suggesting that like maybe some alien races have figured out quantum computing and are running their quantum computers at like the rate that we're running our like cryptocurrency generating mining computers on this earth, and just like expanding the universe multiply through all the things that they are knowing and witnessing through their quantum computing of all the possible iterations of any question that they're asking their quantum computer. So, but it begs the question, like, aren't we all really like quantum computers that are like could know many things in any given instant, like depending on what kind of vibration we're tuned into or what kind of dimension we're really aware of.
Is it teenagers doing tarot readings that is causing this vast expansion?
Well, I think
Does Johnny like me back?
Yes.
It's like,
yes.
If like a Douglas Adams book happened today,
Right.
like, it was like, it's just,
Well,
this one tarot reading went awry, and we have all of this great conflagration.
I mean, and like less nerdily, like I do think that as a metaphor, like as a poetic metaphor, it is true that like the universe expands as each new point of consciousness, i.e. a new baby or alien spawn or whatever you want to call it, like as a new point of consciousness like explores the manifest universe, new things are known about it, and it factually becomes more rich and like more witnessed and more like it just becomes more as it's known more.
I love that. That's so fascinating. I'm just gonna go check on Lulu real quick. Talk amongst yourselves.
That sounds like that. Or go ahead.
You were talking about like this tendency to characterize that which is unknown or like yet to be made known as like dark, or and obviously like a lot of different binaries or dualities like share like a quality of seeming opposition, a quantity of two, but like a quality of seeming opposition. But when you unfold that two into four, almost like the four elements and like
directions,
the four directions, the four the translation of like the four classical kind of elements into like the four fundamental pillars of the psyche in modern psychology. You have like intuition, sensation, thinking, feeling, fire, earth, air, water. And it's interesting like how from a symbol system standpoint, how like so many of our psychological sciences and even like our quantum physics seem to uphold some of those four pillars. Like there's uncanny similarities between fire and electromagnetism, earth and air with the strong and weak forces, and water with gravitation. And from a Jungian standpoint, it's like you wouldn't say that all four of any set of four is the same thing, but in the same way that like any pair, like any duality is like an expression of like polarity. Pairness, yeah, two-ness. It's like any four is like an expression of fourness or a quality of having four. And it's like even the sequence of the elements expression in the zodiac, for example, like say starting with fire, there is some classical orientation around Cancer as being like the first sign of the zodiac, and water as being that sort of amniotic matrix from which arises the next element, fire.
The first creating.
And, and a lot of people nowadays, might frame it, some astrologers might frame it as like, the dissolution or the final satiation at the end of the zodiac of Pisces, the rebirth into Aries is that kind of it's also martial in a way, the coming into the severing of the cord, at birth, but it's just like that emergence of a fiery, like logoic principle from the watery kind of womb-like state, and then the concretization of that fire into the next, which is earth, the becoming somatic, like the ensoulment of the spirit kind of thing. The making flesh of it, and then like air and like the abstraction of like
the knowingness,
the subject from the object, like the air comes from the earth.
Distinctions.
Yes, and to tell the difference between our incarnations. So this like the getting apart for the sake of getting back together, and then the dissolving of the air like back into water.
The universe just hate fucking itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
breakup sex,
or just having
thick,
fun,
syrupy.
having fun on the journey of separation, just
Totally.
because it's so much fun to be like, oh shit, like I'm not fucked over, or I'm not alone,
What did I miss?
Getting well.
The big
Oopsie.
that's some
I spilled
beautiful
some stuff.
the big journey of forgetting. So one acronym for fear, there's a lot of acronyms for fear, but one of them is forget everything and remember.
Forget everything and remember.
Which doesn't necessarily pertain to fear, but it's a good mantra, forget everything and remember.
I like that one. You know what?
Kevin is full of
I'm full of weird,
beautiful wordplays.
Weird distilled golden nuggets of information.
Well, and that's like, I mean, I love to stand at the like crossroads between poetry and like hard nerd math and be like, wow, you guys, y'all are really sipping from the same fountain. You guys are really just saying the same thing, and like depending on what language you get off on speaking, you're really just telling the same story of like these very basic shapes, these very basic geometries that are doing the thing over and over and over in this like beautiful, crazy, ever expanding, ever curious dance. I mean, I think that's the like, to me, I feel like the like metaphor of the ever expanding universe is like curiosity.
Yeah, well, I also think about, various occult orders and things like that. And there's this principle of seeking the mysteries, like seeking not to fully know, because that's impossible, like not to desecrate the mysteries, but seeking to find out more, to learn more, to like go into the unknown, to like drink in and go on that adventure rather than staying in the confines of the homeostasis and the familiar bounds. The known. And in fact, when I do existential kink, a lot of times, like, the main thing I find is, like, my attraction to a certain state has a giant amount to do with, like, the fact that it's known and it's familiar.
Right.
And, like, letting go of it, like, letting go of feeling offended or letting go of feeling scarce entails going into this, like, unknown surrender kind of state of, like, not, accepting the unknown.
Expansiveness. Expansiveness.
Instead of trying to control it and have a reaction to it that's like some sort of predictable, constraining reaction. I feel like all addiction is like how we humans try to protect ourselves from the experience of the absolute future. What Jacques, I don't know how to pronounce French people's names, Derrida called it the absolute future, the horizon of the absolute future, where like these unknown comes towards us. Like we try to avoid encountering the absolute future by creating like these predictable loops of, substances or behaviors or feelings. And I think that's very understandable because the vast unknown is pretty fucking terrifying, and also the source of all adventure.
And full of potential,
Even for the adept, it's like you don't want any one of the mysteries fully undressed quite, do you? It's like, or it's like, I mean, maybe. But it's like,
well, we all want to get naked, Alex, if that's what you're talking about.
Well, the Saturnian...
we would prefer that.
Of course. The Bacchanalia is strong with this one. But it's like that. I love it because you went from like both of y'all like Decan 1 Geminis, and you're talking about curiosity being that essential, like, you know, the mercurial wonder, like keeping things expanding, and then like
God is created in our own image.
The existential kink is a very, you know, Saturnine touch, where it's just like, you know, the boundary between, you know, that which is visible with the naked eye and not, like, and reaching through for the mystery.
Indeed.
Reaching through for the mystery is the aim of
Yeah.
all of our conversations,
Well,
so far as I can tell, Carolyn.
Totally. I wonder, Alex, I know that, like, just sort of very off the cuff for our listeners while we have you here, I wonder if there's anything that you might be able to say about, like, the astrology of, like, you know, like right now and next week, like what's the vibe?
Yeah.
Tell us what the vibe is, man.
Well,
Hot seat.
we're out of that eclipse season, but, you know, there's a full moon coming up. Jupiter, you know, just entered, you know, his nocturnal home of Pisces on December 28th, and so it's a benefic place for Jupiter over the next year. But you know, the astrological doctrine of subsumption might have it that some of the bigger, more you know, frictional and potentially mixed bag kind of aspects, like, you know, they have like delayed releasing. They have this like ongoing releasing. You know, like even, you know, the 3 Saturn-Uranus squares from Saturn and Aquarius to Uranus and Taurus over the course of you know, 2021. Those have some big ripple effects, and like, you know, it's like the age of air ushered in by like the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at, you know, the beginning of Aquarius. This took place in December of 2020. It's like,
Oh yeah, we were
it's
having
like-
a great conversation earlier about the lockdown of the information
yeah,
state.
it's uncanny, like how quickly, like, you know, not just national, but like global conversations surrounding currency, surrounding, you know, valuation of work, surrounding you know, perspective on time, like, you know, some very airy percepts have been, you know, the front and center as far as like our discourse itself, you know, has gone. And so one might feel that, like, I mean, I feel like the age of air in some way, it's not the age of Aquarius in the way that people talk about it sidereally, but it's this age of air, these next 200 years of Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions and air signs. It's like, I feel like that is still like a very preeminent vibe right now. And this Saturn and Aquarius passage through, you know, Saturn spends about 2.5-3 years in each sign for its 29.5-year orbit. You know, this Saturn and Aquarius stint through March 2023 is big. No matter what Zaddy Jupe's doing, it's like there's a lot going on with the United States Pluto return. You know,
Yeah.
it's a
Well,
big
real
one.
quick, I wonder, Alex, if you would tell us like a handful of things that you associate with Saturn and Aquarius that are going on, so people could like start to understand.
Well, I mean, even out the gate, like in, you know, the spring of 2020, people were like drawing comparisons between, you know, what was going on with, like, you know, the George Floyd protests and all of that to like the Rodney King riots back in like the early 90s. But, you know, Saturn's at home in Aquarius. It's its diurnal home, so it's like, you know, the part of the kink of Capricorn is to game systems from the inside out. When you think of like the obnoxious, you know, moments that Jeff Bezos has, like on record, like, you know, coming down from a, you know, space jaunt and, you know, opening a bottle of champagne, interrupting, you know, all these different things. It's like, you know, one can, you know, see like this, some kind of obvious buffoon like jokes, you know, in the picture, but at the same time, it's like, how does a Capricorn want to, you know, some expressions of Capricorn, they want to say like, well, look what I conquered from the inside out. I didn't write the script, but like I can still win in it.
Right.
Aquarius is like a little bit more wall rattling, and they're really two sides of the same coin. There's this tendency in evolutionary astrology to kind of like dualize like Capricorn and Aquarius with this very like Saturn Uranus thing, but it's like some of the biggest punks I know are Capricorn rising. Some of the you like both signs are in on the joke of what a system in place is and like how it can be approached. And Saturn and Aquarius, comfy though it is, it still can be a lot of that. You know, anything. It's like, oh, that's what that is. That. And Saturn and Aquarius, there's definitely a keenness on like rattling the walls a bit more, especially, you know, even throughout this year with the conjunction, you know, the squares to Uranus and Taurus, the 90-degree kind of T-bone aspect.
Those were rough for me. I got Uranus going through my first house.
Yeah, your Taurus rising
they were
for sure.
freaking rough. Well, so what? You mentioned also part of the vibe right now, like the U.S. having its Pluto return. How do you have any sense of how that might like? In what that might entail? Or
Alex was just telling me earlier that he doesn't like to make predictions, so you're really putting
Don't make predictions, Alex. Just tell us about the vibe. What is the vibe of the Saturn return?
I don't shy away from predictions in client work, but I think my approach with writing and forecasting is very much like, it's like, here's what's been going on, here's what's coming up, we're just like enmeshed in it right now. I think it's also because I'm not particularly timely. Like, for someone whose job it is to tell the time in part, like, I'm rarely on it, but well,
it feels kind of fucking foreboding to me. Like, shit feels foreboding AF, and like I hear people talking, like, casually saying, I feel like there's going to be a civil war. Like, I feel like I've heard like 6 people just like randomly say, you know what, I kind of feel like there's going to be a civil war.
Civil war's brewing. Civil war's on the kettle, on the stove.
I mean, I'm not looking forward to such a thing. It's intense. I feel very, I don't know, just like, we've known that things have been super fucked up in all sorts of ways for a long time, but somehow they just seem to have, the heat on it seems to have turned up a few notches.
But don't you think that as a non-dualist, you'll be able to survive any kind of civil war, like, dichotomy fighting, because you will inevitably be able to be a mediator? Don't you feel that possibility, Carolyn? Because I do. Like,
gee golly gosh, I hope so. I feel like I've...
Gee golly gosh.
I'll need to stick around her. When I did that Enneagram thing, I had like 0 points under Peacemaker. I was like,
oh, man. All right, I'm peacemaking, am I?
Well, yeah, well, it sounds like I think we want to peace out. Well, thank you for listening to us, everybody. Thank you for joining in on our potluck, and I hope your consciousness keeps expanding the amount of dark matter in the universe. Thanks please do it. This has been the Sleepover Podcast. Leave us a little review, subscribe, whatever platform you're on. Tell your friends.
Share with your friends.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.
All right, good night.
Peace.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carolyn Elliott.
And this is Laila Bernard.
And you are listening to the Sleepover Podcast.
Coming to you live from Layla's living room tonight.
Yeah, we got Lulu here with us. So I was just saying to Laila that I was really enjoying the conversation that we had the other night with Alexander Baker and Kevin May about dark matter.
Yes.
And I was like, I really don't understand quantum physics. Like, I mean, sort of like at a super I'm just so remedial when it comes to, and I've tried, you know, I've had people explain it to me, I've read books, it doesn't seem to sink in super well. I watched a documentary last night about David Bohm, and I find it very sexy when David Bohm talks about like the implicate order and the explicate order and his dialogues with Krishnamurti from the 70s.
Oh, God.
I watched all of them because my dad was in like Krishnamurti club.
My dad was in a Krishnamurti fascination as well. He never joined a club because he was a total introvert, but like, I grew up on the Krishnamurti dad vibe too, Carolyn.
Weird.
Who knew?
That's such a specific vibe, Leah.
I know, it is.
Will the synchronicities ever end?
I know, truly we are sisters.
So I saw, you know, and but
can you tell the name of these videos? Because I'm like, I should watch these.
Well, I think they're just like, if you looked up like Krishnamurti, David Bohm dialogues, I think there were also conversations with like David Bohm, Krishnamurti, and Rupert Sheldrake. I think there was this like whole series in the 70s that they did, because like Krishnamurti and David Bohm were like in love with each other and like just loved talking. And
sounds familiar.
Yeah. Yeah. And so anywho, I was just thinking that it would maybe be fun for our other podcast listeners to hear me getting Laila, who has a background, you know, as a physics teacher, to
high school physics teacher with a super nerd dad and weird interests.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
My eclectic credentials.
Yeah. To explain some quantum physics to me. So something that I'm aware
let's maybe start with questions and we'll see where it goes.
Well, I want to start with questions, and I want to say that like the area that I'm most interested in that the David Bohm documentary last night was reminding me of was the way that I guess there's no orthodox accepted reconciliation so far of like the theory of relativity with the quantum theories or knowledge, such that there's currently, as far as I understand it, in the physics orthodoxy, like this, they're not sure how to connect the above and the below, like the micro and the macro. Seems like there's a rift. There's a rift.
Oof. And Carolyn, yes, now that you're saying that, I think that's still true. Yeah. And also I'm like, wow, What an important metaphor.
Yeah, right? Huge.
Dude, yeah.
Huge. And there's this guy, Nassim Haramein, who has all these shows on Gaia. And I guess he has his own like online courses and stuff. And he has a theory that unifies the macro and the micro. What are you saying, Lulu? You want... Okay, I'm not sure what you want right now, but real quick. He has a theory that I've...
No, T-Rex.
You like something. You like K-Rax? You like JJ? You want to watch... JJ is what she calls cartoons on my phone. Okay, my phone's probably going to die pretty soon, but I'll let you watch cartoons, baby.
Yay! JJ!
Yay, JJ. So, one second. So Nassim Haramein has some compelling things that I'm still working on understanding, but like as far as I have understood from that so far, one of the main things he talks about is like there's just a black hole at the center of everything. Like there's a black hole at the center of galaxies, which I guess is well known. And according to him, there's also like a black hole at the center of the sun, a black hole at the center of the earth, black holes at the center of like every atom.
Interesting.
And I don't quite know how to wrap my mind around that, but I'm interested in it. So anyways, just like laying that out as saying like that's like I'm sure I could morph my grasp of relativity theory itself and quantum theory are both pretty shaky, but I'm also just interested in the fact that apparently it hasn't been
reconciled,
totally agreed upon and reconciled, this thing between the micro and the macro. And I guess I just wanted you to start explaining it to me, Laila, because obviously it's huge for, it's a huge spiritual consequence, right? Like when our great Hermetic forefather, Giordano Bruno, he figured out that, right, all of the stars were suns. And he let this be known. And the Vatican was like, cool, now you have to die because we don't want to know that.
Right.
And so, there's, and Aleister Crowley and the whole, like, Thelemic stream, like, part of what the new Aeon is supposed to be about is the dawning understanding, the dawning realization amongst humans that consciousness is continuous, right? That we are souls and are basically like the full integration of that. I guess, was it Copernicus or Galileo who was like, yeah, the earth goes around the sun, and that's why the sun seems to disappear, but it doesn't really disappear, it's continuous. And like that great Flaming Lips song really drives it home, like, do you realize?
Right, it's just an illusion caused by the world going round.
Yeah, and that, and it's similarly that our souls, that death is an illusion in the sense that it's, consciousness is always existing, and whatever, we leave one form and consciousness is just existing in another form. So, I'm not sure exactly where we could start, but maybe you could start with,
Well, I could just start just chatting. I mean, so obviously because none of the great poet, theoretical mathematician, physicists have been able to like, converge on one answer of how these things meet. I certainly don't have those answers. But I guess like, so the name quantum, like it's called quantum physics because it's this theory that everything in the universe exists as quanta, as like particles that have either like binary levels of reality where they either exist or do not exist. Like everything is just when you get right down to it, everything is made of these little bloops, these little like bubbles of bloopiness. And so the theories of relativity and like gravity and stuff about black holes and like all of the Newtonian obvious physics of like push and pull and falling and whatever, that belongs to the like macroscopic world. Mm-hmm. And the quantized world is, well, completely the opposite. It's like way, way, way down at the level where everything is mostly space. Like the ratio between like the nucleus of an atom that seems so material and real, and that like we're all made of bajillion, zillions, innumerable of them. Like the ratio of space between like the center of an atom and an electron is like, I think I've heard it's like something the size of maybe like a baseball at the center of a baseball stadium, and the electrons are like bumblebees circling at like the edges of the stadium. Okay. So like that's mostly space. And so these things that exist are really small. And okay, where am I going with this? People don't know where those quanta come from. Like that's basically the great mystery in a lot of ways. Like that's kind of what like physics and all these things are really trying to like reconcile, is like not only how does the manifest universe work, but like where does it come from? I think one of the things that like makes quantum things, like in the way that people talk about them in the like spirituality plane, easier to understand is if you start to understand that a lot like that what has come out of quantum thought is field theory, that these quanta arise as like signals in a field. So we're all familiar with like the most basic one that you have all interacted with is like a magnetic field, where like even though you can't see what's driving those things apart when you try to put two of the same poles of a magnet together, you can't see it at all. It's undeniably there.
It's there.
Like, it's really undeniably there. And I've heard like many, super high level physicist nerd brains just like revel in that weird mystery. Like I have nerded out on this many times. Like if you want to have a just fun experience, grab some magnets and like really think about how strange it is that like there is a action there that you can't see or explain. Anyway, so that's like an example of a field which creates some kind of force like at a distance through space.
Wait, could we just pause for a second?
For sure.
I thought that they could explain it.
Could explain magnetism.
Yeah.
Yes, it is explainable, but like it's not visible.
Okay.
It's what I'm saying is that it's not visible, and it's not like strictly, like the action isn't strictly physical. Like it's not physical in the like Newtonian sense of like something pushing on itself. Like it's a force that is inherent to the properties of the matter, not like. Anyway, I feel like somebody who's really,
No, I get it. It's not like billiard balls hitting each other. It's an invisible field,
And where does the field come from? In the case of magnetism, the field comes from the alignment of electrons. Like the electrons are aligned. In any case, light is also something that travels as a field. Like that's one of the first like quantum experiments, is that they realized that like light photons as a particle, light exists as a wave that travels through a field and as a particle that like hits other matter. You can never witness them being both at the same time. It will only be one or the other. One of the weird things about this, I'm sure many people have heard about this, but like one of the facts about that is that like it's impossible, like, when light is not being observed directly, it behaves as a wave where like it could be on any number of levels. It's traveling through some medium. It's like an energy information. And then when it's like when it is observed, it behaves as a particle that is like you can measure its location. It has a determinate nature.
So it becomes like definite.
It becomes real in a way, like in the way that we think of things as being real. Like it becomes real. I'm weaving together a lot of things. This is an impromptu conversation. But the reason I'm talking about fields is because in this book on quantum physics that I've just been reading, it's really been driving home for me the fact that all stuff emerges as like information in these fields. They all like not only electrons are the result of fields and create fields and like influence fields, but like all matter is just like one possible state of a field that like magnetism exists potentially everywhere.
Okay, wait. Okay, sorry, I was fixing the JJ.
It's
So
okay.
all matter is in a field that exists potentially everywhere.
Correct. It is all manifestations. It's all the like blooping into bloop available reality as we know it of a field. Like there's matter fields, there's gravity fields, there's time fields, there's space. Well, time and space are a field that are interwoven in a dimension. But like all of these things are fields that have values. Like, you know, they oscillate in multidimensional space, and when they have certain values, they exist as stuff, or exist as light, or exist as force. They exist. But the field exists even when there is no light, no matter, no nothing. Like the field is always present. Except people wonder about what's beyond the field boundary of space and time. Like that's, you know, the question. Anyway.
Well, okay, so yeah, so this is what I guess is just what's really trippy about it. So we're saying that unobserved, so like let's, you know, like there's a room, an empty room, nobody's observing it. When it's not being observed, what becomes a room when it is observed, when it's not being observed, is just this fluxing field of potential existence, like potential light, matter, space, time. We don't know, it could just, I mean, but then when we walk into the room and now there's an observer, it arranges itself into position. And this is what's confusing me, I guess, is because why does it arrange itself into the same room every time I walk into it?
Well, I think... Okay, y'all, we were in the middle of our conversation about Carolyn wondering why the rooms collapse. Okay, so I think that...
I mean, my kitchen just seems remarkably the same when I walk into it. I don't know why.
Well, sure. Okay, I think maybe we've gone like super deep, super fast, but like we've gone super deep, super fast because yes, it does seem that way. I feel like we're way off the topic of like actual quantum physics, but that's probably because that's where we want to be anyway. I think that the answer to that question is that like matter exists in the mind of God. Like the fact that it's remarkably consistent and consistent for you and me is like evidence that there is a consciousness that endures beyond just your perception and my perception. You know what I'm saying? Like there is a larger consciousness that's holding the whole fucking universe together. You know what I'm saying? And we're just blipping off of that. The more we can tap into it, so says the magic, the more we like actually rearrange how the universe knows itself to be. But like currently the universe knows itself to be the way that you have it be. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Okay, well, cool. Let's go back to the fields, and stuff is blipping in and out, and there's quanta.
Yes.
And nobody knows where the quanta come from exactly, but they just come in.
They are fields. They exist as fields. They are, manifestations of a way of being, like a piece of information in a field. I don't really know how to say it better than that. And I think I'm on this trip because I have just recently watched a couple of YouTube videos on the notion of consciousness being the, like, okay, so this is the thing, Carolyn. This is the, kind of like what we were talking about at the very beginning about how they're like trying to reconcile this like macrocosmic relativistic universe with the quantum universe. Many people are looking for the unifying field that will make the like gravitational space-time fields and the quantum blipping in and out, flickering, strange, kind of counterintuitive microcosmic world that will unify them to like basically answer the exact question that you're asking, because like
Okay.
and this YouTube video was about the idea that consciousness very well may be that field, and that is one, like that our consciousness is an ordering mechanism of the universe, or our consciousnesses are an outcropping of the larger, before time, pre-Big Bang, before the creation of the universe, outside of time, before time and space even were, there was nothing. And that's the like pre-physical universe that exists kind of like behind our universe and knows. Anyway, there's a knowing that has happened that has created this stability. Because without the knowing of like where things are, what things are, or the witnessing or the making determinate of things, then like in the vacuum of space, every trillionth of a second, I think I said this on the previous, episode, pieces of matter are coming into being and then recolliding, so such that there is nothing. And that's like, I feel like that's the poetic understanding that like where in space we perceive vacuum and nothing and just like there isn't anything happening there and except currently expanding like dark matter, that's the like metaphor for what is behind everything, is like this constant potential for things to be, and where things are where like order and self-knowledge and self-organization have like congealed and like held on to reality.
Yes.
This is very strange.
I dwell in possibility, a fairer house than prose, superior for windows, innumerable for doors. I don't know if I'm remembering my Dickinson correctly, but I always think about that whenever I hear about the unknown quantum existence, that it's like this possibility. Well, here's something. What is quantum entanglement? Because I've heard it explained in various ways and it still doesn't stick in my brain good.
So my understanding of quantum entanglement is that two particles can be created such that no matter where in space they are, they faster than the speed of light, instantaneously, they mimic each other's position and rotation, and they do exactly the same thing. And without field theory, that's like impossible to explain, because they're like two little particles, and how, by what would they be communicating if not through this field that carries information? Just like, I nerd out thinking about this all the time. Like, the way that anyone is listening to us on this podcast is through a field of electromagnetic information that is like pulsing through the atmosphere all around them, being converted by their phone into other electromagnetic field signals that are like causing a little physical bumbling. Like, that's all happening in a field. We can't see it. And again, and like that's also what's happening with these quantum entangled particles, is that like there's information being shared in a field that those things are a bloop out of, that they don't exist really separately from, even though we can't see the field or touch the field. They're like little polyps in a ocean.
So and their connection is faster than the speed of light. Like, it's precisely instantaneous.
They know one another.
Okay. And how do two particles get to be entangled in this way?
I'm not exactly sure that I know the answer to that question.
Seems like an important magical question. I mean, because I think that like a lot of what's done with sympathetic magic, for example in hoodoo, when like you get somebody's hair and then like you do a spell, you put it in a honey pot, you pray to Venus or whatever to sweeten your relations with them, or you curse them or whatnot. I think there's like some idea there that like you're acting upon their DNA, and whatever you're doing to their DNA is connected to the rest of them, like through this kind of maybe quantum entangled principle, and therefore that's how the magic is then affecting the person whose DNA, whose hair it is.
Well, I think that in the poetic reconciliation of consciousness with matter makes perfect and utter sense, and also is completely like unorthodox.
Yeah,
You know,
indeed.
I mean, it's an unthinkable thought in the
Yeah.
worlds of science.
Well, so I wonder if you have insights for me. So the documentary that I was watching about David Bohm last night was talking about how in 1952 he wrote this paper about hidden variables, and basically saying that when you do the slit experiment with photons.
Yep, that's the thing about waves versus particles, observation and not, yeah.
Yeah, that he had these calculations that only like decades later, using computer modeling, were they able to really explore more deeply, that showed that there is sort of a way to predict how the protons will manifest, I guess.
How
or
the
like
photons, yeah.
Yeah, photons, right. How the photons will travel based on a visualization of the field sort of thing. And apparently when he wrote this in 1952 and he gave it to his mentor, who was Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, and gave it to Einstein, they were all working together at Princeton, that they couldn't disprove it. And they sort of had this agreement. They were like, well, if we can't disprove this, we have to agree to ignore it. So they couldn't disprove it, and they agreed to ignore it, and they exiled David Bohm for decades from the respectable...
his heresy.
Yes, for his deep heresy. They exiled him to first Brazil, and then he was in Israel, and then he was in the UK, where he met and fell in love with Krishnamurti.
So beautiful.
It is so beautiful. And I was just, with my feeble understanding of things, I was like, well, why was this so offensive to Oppenheimer and Einstein that they couldn't allow it in? I don't know if you know anything about that.
I don't know anything about that. Unfortunately, I don't.
That's okay. Well, one of the things that I'm attracted to about David Bohm is that he's really into this notion that there's this wholeness, this moving wholeness, and that basically there's this implicate order where there's this underlying something going on, and comes out into the explicate. And then there's something about non-locality. I think that was the offensiveness was that he because I guess as far as I was understanding, something about relativity, the theory of relativity relies on notions of locality and things moving from here to there,
Being where they're supposed to be.
Yeah. And that what Bohm was saying was sort of annihilating that and being actually it's in some deep way it's non-local, everything, which I don't understand. I'm not sure. So maybe we won't be able to pierce that tonight. But
well, I think that really is the big question in the whole thing, is because there isn't really a good explanation in quantum theory for why things exist in the way that they do versus the infinite number of other potential ways that they could possibly have existed. That's quantum theory dwells in this probabilistic space where we can know some things but not all things. We can know, it's not, things aren't as well, they could be otherwise. Depending on when we looked at it, it could be otherwise. And anyway.
Well, so what this was also making me think of was in this cosmometry book by Marshall Lefferts. Cosmometry, I guess, combines cymatics, the study of vibration, with study of music theory and the study of Buckminster Fuller's geometries. Sort of weaves them all together, and the physics of Nassim Haramein, and anyways, has something to do with, they were saying that in empty space, or maybe dark matter, in every little inch of it, there's as much energy as there is in the whole manifest universe.
Right.
As much potential energy and matter. And I'm really trying to understand that, because because theoretically, I guess, if one could tap into that, then there would be free energy, right? Like, if you can mine that somehow, then there's no limitation. And I guess was something that Tesla was into. I'm not sure, but what do you know about that?
I think that is what I was talking about before, where like in the vast emptiness of space, there is the same kind of, next octave resonance of infinite potential things that could be, as there was at the beginning of the universe. Prior to the existence of the manifest universe, everything was just the vast nothingness potential. Like, where did all the fucking energy that's in the universe fucking come from? Mm-hmm. Where did it come from? We know it can be neither created nor destroyed within this paradigm, but where the fuck did this paradigm come from? And that's what they're talking about, is that like in the vastness of space is the same kind of, like I was talking about, this potential energy where matter pops into being on such like tiny little time frames and then collapses back into itself. Those are all moments that could turn into other universes were the conditions to emerge. Like there isn't, like that is the kind of like pulsing huge, that's the nothingness that is outside of space, is like this nothingness that is roiling at every point in every trillionth of a second with like creation, destruction. It's just like a pool. And like this reality that we live in, by contrast, is like a placid, slowed down crystal, like emerging as a tiny little bubble from the vast, weird cosmic potential that's everywhere around it that it isn't, but it's a very different kind of isn't than we would imagine. It's not like a hole. It's like
it's a fullness.
It's somehow a fullness. It's like somehow a like bursting, like the image that always comes to my mind is like a roiling, boiling pot of just like things coming into chaotic whatever. And the interesting thing to me that I just learned is that, I think I maybe said this on the last podcast or the last episode, but I'll say it again, that like the background radiation of the whole universe, like if you look at the farthest thing you can see, it's a snapshot of the moment that stuff happened out of the nothing. Like it's the first thing that was known and then like kept growing. I don't know.
All right.
I feel
cool.
like I'm really...
You're fine. You're doing fine. What is this thing when people talk about quantum computing? What the fuck is that?
Well, so that is leveraging this quality of matter.
It's right here, baby.
Of types of matter, or matter in general. It's leveraging the fact that these things exist in potentiality in many different states. So like in normal computing, you can only go as fast as the like known determinate particles of electrons flowing through the circuitry can go. And they can get that, pretty fast, getting things cold. But to do this like quantum computing, I think it has to be very cold. And then the matter can like the potentiality of matter is leveraged to do the computing so that the electrons are in multiple states at the same time to do these calculations. And I don't really exactly understand how that's all working. It seems like some very deep wizardry, very deep, serious wizardry, but that's like what it's leveraging, is this possibility of things being in multiple places at once.
Wow. Yeah, it does seem like very deep wizardry to me, and I guess my only reference point for it really is, in his Dark Materials, where there's a physicist who's interfacing, I guess, with like a quantum computer, and she starts asking questions with the I Ching to the dark matter.
And starts talking back to her.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's what we're all doing when we do divination, is we are talking to that non-local intelligence that is in touch with everything else, that is the holistic field.
Right, and that's why, like the only possible reflection you could get would be the reflection of the whole thing, because that's how it knows itself to be. And it's just intrinsically truthful. Like the universe is like so non-deceitful. Just is what it is.
That's so interesting to me, because the human mind is so deceitful, right? Like our language and our linear inner monologues, and like we walk around in these like trances, at least I do a lot of the time, in like this trance of like listening to my thoughts, believing them to be true somehow, believing them to be some kind of map of what's going on, and then so often they are not. And they never really are, because they, I guess, are just, because the whole is what's always true, and not the fragment.
And it's like a separation from like the beingness. I mean, I think that's why, just being is of such high value in the spiritual practice, and just like resting into the fact that like the story does not actually impact like this very real physical moment of what is actually being now. Like the story about it isn't the thing itself.
I like when Byron Katie says that reality is always so much kinder than our story about it. I really love that. That helps me a lot.
I mean, and I think it's important to remember that mind and consciousness are not the same thing. Right? Like, that's the trick, is that your mind wants you to think that it's consciousness.
Right, but there's like a 1/100,000th of a second or something, like, gap between our ordinary minds and, like, what's happening, right? Like, I guess from reading various things in consciousness studies, philosophy, I've learned that, like, apparently we think like that we decide to like, oh, I'm gonna pick up this cup, but really I started picking up the cup before that decision was made, and there's like this tiny little gap, and that the ego, inner monologue, whatever, tells a story of agency that apparently is completely false.
Yeah, so like ever since I've been really thinking about the like field puddle nature, like what I have, so I guess what I'm really trying to put across here is that I have also found quantum theory to be like pretty confusing when I think of it as just like things like marbles blipping into existence and then non-blipping into existence. Like that seems kind of fucking weird. But when I think of it as like values on a field, or like, yeah, so like if you imagine like a wave form on a piece of paper, and then and so it has like this whole life, this whole like up and down wave. But imagine that like your perception, imagine that you can only know that wave when it's at a value of 1, or it's like at a certain value. And you can like, so you draw a line across that wave at the certain value. So instead of looking like a wave viewed from the outside, all you're going to see is dots, dot, 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 right? Because you're like just drawing like where those lines intersect, where the wave line and the horizontal line intersect, you're just going to see dots of things. And that's like really helping me think about how we exist, is that like what we are is like viewing the whole multi-dimensional thing through this like one little aperture, and it can exist at other values, but we're not aware of them. And as we like move, we're not so much like hauling our carcass through space and time. It's like we are like blooping in and out of existence in this medium that exists even when we're not in it. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm trying to say here? Is it making sense? Like, instead of it being like, I am a distinct thing from my environment moving through a foreign environment, it's more like the environment knows that I'm here, in this shape until it decides that it's here in this shape. And then more than like my matter moving, the universe just knows that this is where me is in the soup that I could be in literally anywhere. Do you know what I'm pointing at here?
Barely, just
okay.
barely. I guess I'm getting the impression that it is sort of like we're kind of like these eddies within an ocean, and the ocean is moving us, and we kind of we imagine that we're moving ourselves, but we're just like being moved in the whole ocean.
Correct. That's, yes, a great metaphor for it.
Yeah, so like all of those philosophies, like the non-dual, sort of like non-doership, things of just like surrendering agency has like a deep truth in it, I guess, a scientific truth that like correct, you are just being moved by the whole, and there's a story going on that you're directing it, but that story is just also a product that's being created by the movements of the ocean and the eddies.
Well, and I think that that's like the magical link up is that like, yes, the consciousness like moves you more than, like the consciousness is moving you, but you are also the consciousness. So you do have influence over like what kinds of knowledge, and by that I mean like any kind of movement or action or whatever, like what kinds of knowledge come through you. Like you could be like conscious of all kinds of fearful things. You could be letting your mind show your consciousness all kinds of fearful stories, and then you will behave in a way that conforms to those things, and those will become more and more real. Or your consciousness can be fed by other kinds of thoughts, and then the consciousness behaves differently. Right? Like if you're like afraid of someone, if your consciousness is being fed fear, then your reaction to them is like,
Yes, the
fight, flight, fawn, whatever. But if your consciousness is one of like curiosity, love, trust, then your behavior and your knowing of what is appropriate action in the next moment will be different.
I do love that, and I guess the way that I'm able to make sense of that is like the Buddhist parable about, right, like the 6 kinds of beings. Like there's, hungry ghosts, there's animals, there's humans, there's devas, like titans, there's gods, and there's, I don't know, some other kind of miserable ghost thing. And like a hungry ghost will come and see a river, and the river will be like pus and blood, and they're thirsty and they try to drink, but it's all gross and it's just miserable. And like a human will see a river and it's water, and they can drink the water. And a god will see the river and it's like perfect, immortal, like nectar that they can not just satiate a human thirst, but give them, immortality and whatnot. And it is my experience. So I have noticed so much like that, exactly what you're talking about. I mean, I guess that's what my whole life and work is about, is trying to notice it more deeply.
Well, and I mean, correct. And like, you were telling me this, earlier this evening, that you were having an experience where your consciousness was feeling like full of like criticism, negativity, judgment, and it was making you physically feel ill. Like it was actually impacting your material being.
Yes.
And this is obviously not hard science here, but like it is our unverified personal gnosis that the like experience of being changes your physical reality.
Certainly. And sadly, my phone has died, so the cartoons are no longer flowing for Lulu, so I guess she's going to get fussy and needs attention.
Hey.
So I guess this is our cue to wrap it up, but thank you everybody for joining us in this in my remedial quantum physics
and in my bullshit poet explanation, high school science teacher mystical poet explanation of the mysteries of the universe.
I love it, Layla. It helps me so much. It helps me so much. Yes, honey. We'll get you JJ. All right. Have a good night, everybody, or good whatever you are. Bye-bye.